Jen, we need you in the office right now. I said, who? What? Charles and Diana? Really? And that was a huge story. So much had gone wrong. It was shocking. 1992 was a year of absolute trauma for the royal family. Actually, it was a bit of a year of trauma for me as well, because, I had a little tiny girl. She was 2 that year. And it was a crazy year. It was just non-stop from the beginning when there was the tour of India, Charles and Diana. There was the Andrew Morton book. It just went on and on. And in mid-August, I was just having a little rest, thinking, a couple of weeks off now, and the phone went about 5 a.m. in the morning. Jen, we need you in the office right now. I said, what is it now? And said, it's Fergie. It's Fergie. She's been pictured topless in the south of France, having her toes sucked by her financial advisor. I couldn't believe it. By this time in my career, I'm a pretty hard news journalist. I was presenting the Today program as well as doing royal stuff. I thought, oh my gosh, I've now got to go and talk about a woman having her toes sucked, really. It was crazy. It was utter humiliation for the Duchess of York. She was at Balmoral at the time, and she went down to breakfast, I think, and everyone had the papers in front of them, all laid out, and she was profoundly embarrassed. And she was summoned by the Queen, with whom she had always got on very well. And in her own words, Sarah's own words, the Queen was absolutely livid with her. So it was an utter humiliation for Fergie, and she didn't really recover from that, not for a very long time anyway. 1992 was the Queen's annus horribilis.
It has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
I think she christened that partly because of the fire at Windsor Castle. That came towards the end of that terrible year when so much had gone wrong with the royal family. I was down at Buckingham Palace, actually. It was November the 20th, which happened to be the Queen and Duke's wedding anniversary. And I was having a chat with her press secretary, Charles Anson. We had a little chat, cup of coffee. When he went outside, he was called by Robert Fellows, the private secretary, outside, and they had a little natter in the corridor. So I sat there, thought nothing of it, came back in, carried on our conversation. And then Robert Fellows came in and said, Charles, can I just have another word? Out they popped again. And when they were outside, my pager went off. We had pagers in those days. And it was my news desk saying, Windsor Castle is on fire. I said, for God's sakes, here I am sitting in Buckingham Palace and nobody's told me the castle is on fire. So that's obviously what these two were talking about outside the door. So off I went, screaming down the motorway towards the castle. And I must admit, it was shocking to see the smoke billowing and some of the flames you can see from the motorway, a couple of miles away. And I thought, woof, this is a big story. So Pat McCann went up the hill, and it was terrible what was going on. I actually thought the whole of the castle was going to go up. And it took a very long time for the firefighters, many of them, to contain the fire, which had started in one of the rooms. I can't remember quite which room. A curtain had caught fire from a lamp that some building work was going on, and the lamp was too close to the curtain. Curtain had set on fire, and whoosh. And during the course of that afternoon, we saw some of the hugely valuable works of art being brought out, with Prince Andrew helping and organising all of this. A massive carpet, sort of, I don't know how long, bigger than 3 or 4 houses put together, rolled up on people's shoulders, and they were walking out. And this went on all day. And the next day, the Queen came to see the devastation, and it was raining, and she had a cold, I think, then, and she had a headscarf on, a little brown mac and Wellington boots, and there was debris all around, and suddenly she sneezed. And she just in that instant looked like a poor old elderly lady who had lost prized possessions and part of her favourite home. Yeah, I know she's got other homes, etc., but it was very sad. It was very poignant. And it was the fire at Windsor Castle that prompted a big row over who was going to pay for the repairs. And it was that row which led Buckingham Palace to be open for the palace, because to the public, because that's what was decided, that they would open Buckingham Palace to the public, and the revenue from that would help pay, and did pay, for the Windsor Castle restoration. 4 days after the Windsor Castle fire, the Queen was invited to Guildhall for a special lunch. It was to mark the anniversary of her accession to the throne, actually. But this had been a shocking year. Everything had gone wrong in 1992. And she came into Guildhall, and she was such a tiny figure, and she looked even frailer because she was still suffering from a cold and from the smoke effects of being at Windsor Castle after the fire. And she stood up to make a speech which started out in a fairly routine fashion, but we had been told it would be of interest. And all of a sudden, she launched into a reflection on the year, which she had said it was not a year which she would look back on with undiluted pleasure. And in the words of one of her more sympathetic correspondents, it had been an
annus horribilis.
And that in itself was an extraordinary statement, and quite personal from someone like the Queen. But the speech went on, and she talked about how no institution can be exempt from scrutiny by the public, by those who support that institution, and indeed by those who don't support it. But it was very, very moving, I thought. She said that perhaps any criticism that needed to be made could be more effective if it was made with a touch of gentleness and a little humour. And, I sat there as a reporter. I was invited to the lunch, actually. I was sitting there as a guest and as a reporter, feeling really rather guilty. As I thought, gosh, have I been cruel in my coverage? I hoped I hadn't. I hoped I'd been objective. But this was a woman who was clearly hurting and had been cut, perhaps not to the quick, but cut by the criticism that had gone on all year. This was the year when so much had gone wrong, and when the whole family was being lampooned as the most dysfunctional family in the world. And there was more to come. Not long after that speech, we had the denouement, the climax of that whole year, with the announcement of the separation of Charles and Diana. But that speech summed up what the year had been for the Queen. In 1992, I was following Neil Kinnock around the country, actually, on a general election campaign. And the royal story is usually very quiet during an election campaign because it's protocol, not to rock the boat. And suddenly I'd been out with Kinnock all day and got back really late, and the phone went in the middle of the night, and it was the BBC, and they were saying, we need you in the office, they're breaking up. I said, who? What? Charles and Diana? Really? And they said, no, Andrew and Fergie. What? I thought they were the happiest married couple in the world. I fired myself into the office, and I was ringing the palace all the way. And of course, they were saying, I'm so sorry, I can't tell you anything about this. And these rumours went on all day long. And the palace actually did not confirm it, nor did they deny it. And the world was going crazy, it seemed to me. And then it was the next day that we were summoned to the palace, a core group of royal correspondents, very small group. And we were taken down there, and there was a statement issued saying, yes, there were discussions about a separation. These discussions were still ongoing. But in the meantime, the Queen thought it best to put out this statement because of the disruption to the election campaign. And I screamed out of the palace to do a piece to camera for television. And my radio counterpart stayed inside, Paul Reynolds, in the palace, and had a few more words with the press spokesman for the Queen. And during that conversation, Charles Anson, intimated that Fergie had behaved in very inappropriate ways. She'd put a painted bag on her head on a trip across the Atlantic. She'd generally been a bit sort of louche. And Paul came out and said, the knives are out for Fergie. And that was a huge story. So further disruption to the election campaign because the story kept on rolling. Charles Anson was very upset that he had been so outspoken, and he offered his resignation to the Queen, actually. She refused it, and he continued for several more years. But it was a very dramatic story for all sorts of reasons. One of the most famous pictures of Diana, I think, is her sitting alone in front of the monument to beauty and love, the Taj Mahal in India. I was there with her in 1992. There were many, many rumours that by then that the marriage was in trouble. But the palace kept telling us, oh, every marriage has ups and downs. Of course it does. They're fine, really. And we believed them. Of course, it wasn't true. I don't particularly blame the palace spokesman. I mean, what was he to say? You know, they're living separate lives. They both got lovers. It's over. No, they had to go along with this fairy tale of a marriage that was still together. So it was a day in which they were on separate engagements. Prince Charles was going to business lunch and Diana was going to the Taj Mahal. Well, of course, we, the press party, knew exactly where we were going to go, and that was to the Taj Mahal. And we took our shots of her as she went in, and then she came out and sat by herself, alone on this bench, this marble bench, in front of this monument to beauty. She allowed us to take quite lengthy footage of her sitting there. And it was the perfect image of woman deserted, woman alone, my marriage is over. That's what it looked like. Was that what she was trying to do? I'm not sure. But as she came out, we asked her, I said, well, what did you think of it? What do you think of it? And she said, it's so healing. And we said, well, what do you mean? She didn't want to expand on that. But I think it was undoubtedly Diana's coded message of saying, you know, I'm hurting here. I'm hurting. My marriage is over. Mm-hmm. It was very sad. Mm.